Welcome to Next Level Play Therapy, a weekly podcast dedicated to supporting the next generation of child and adolescent therapists to provide exceptional play therapy services. We'll explore all things play therapy to elevate your work with children and adolescents using the therapeutic powers of play. I'll discuss practical tips and ideas so you can provide a transformative experience for your young clients and make a real difference in their lives. So get ready to take your play therapy skills to the next level and make a lasting impact in the lives of children, adolescents, and families. Good morning. Welcome to this week's episode of Next Level Play Therapy, where we talk about all things play therapy. And this week, we're exploring how to work with adolescents in play therapy. And we've been doing that for the last few episodes. So if this is an episode or this is a topic that's of interest to you, then I would highly encourage you to go back. And if you're listening to the podcast, then listen to the previous episodes. Or if you're watching the live stream video replays or even the live stream this morning, then I would highly recommend that you go back and listen to those, listen to the previous episodes. This week, we're diving into, can you use Santre therapy with adolescents? And how do you do that in a way that respects their developmental needs and their emotional needs in therapy, especially if you're using play therapy to help your adolescent clients. So that's why we're going to be talking about Santre therapy, using the Santre making process in play therapy with adolescents, and I'll even say adults. I'll tell you what, the Santre therapy process is one of my go-tos. So if you've been in play therapy, if you've been in the play therapy field or, atmosphere for a little while, you have probably heard of Santre, and you might have heard it referred to sand play. There is a difference between sand play and Santre. Those terms get mixed up all the time. I have a previous episode on that if you're interested in learning more. For the purposes of this episode, I'm going to refer to it as Santre, because I'm not talking about the process that is rooted in Jungian psychoanalytic theory. So this episode, we're going to be talking about how do you use the Santre making process in play therapy with your adolescent clients in a way that meets their needs. And I'm going to go over some tips and strategies for that as well. So if you are watching live, I would love to know who's watching. Feel free to post your name in the comments, what population that you work with. Are you using Santre in the therapy process? Are you working with adolescents? So post that in the comments. If you are watching the replay, I would still love to know who's here and watching. And if you're listening on the podcast, feel free to pop over to my Instagram channel at Renewing Hearts Training and send me a message and join the conversation. Or email me, actually. I would love to know your thoughts about using Santre in play therapy with adolescents for sure. Alrighty. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to be talking about is, so the topic that we're discussing today, if you're coming on a little bit later, is Santre therapy in play therapy with teens, how to use it effectively. So the first thing that I want to talk about is using expressive arts. in play therapy with adolescents, because the Santre therapy process is accessing expressive arts. So other expressive arts modalities are art or music or poetry. I talked about poetry last in the previous episode, dance, music, using clay and pottery. The thing about using the Santre making process in play therapy is thinking about how you help your adolescent clients access those therapeutic powers of play using a theoretical model. So that's what sets play therapy apart from other expressive modalities, is accessing the therapy using a therapeutic, oh, my mouth isn't working today, using a theoretical model to access the therapeutic powers of play within the context of the strong therapeutic relationship. That's how the Association for Play Therapy defines what play therapy is. And so when we're thinking about using the Santre making process, we're thinking about how are you helping your adolescent clients access those therapeutic powers of play. For example, how are they accessing their unconscious? So one of the therapeutic powers of play is access to the unconscious. Another one is self-expression. Another one is creative problem solving. You might do some direct or indirect teaching, helping to promote positive feelings and create a positive experience, attachment relationships. All of these are the ways in which play therapists use that play process to facilitate healing for their clients. And so when we're thinking about using expressive arts with our adolescent clients, then we are thinking about how are we using expressive arts to access those therapeutic powers of play, and what theoretical model are you using? Because your theoretical model is going to influence what you do, when you do it, how you do it, and how do you make sense of what is going on in the Santre making process. So your theory model is going to ground you. Even when you're using an integrative theoretical model, it's still grounded in specific theory models. So if most of us, I would say, use an integrative model, and there are still specific theory models. For example, I love using an attachment and neuroscience lens. One of the things that I love about child-centered play therapy that I use with my really young clients is that it is so heavily attachment focused. And so if I'm using an integrative model, then I'm kind of blending together specific theory models like attachment theory or interpersonal neurobiology or polyvagal theory, or maybe you have been trained using IFS. I've taken a few trainings. I know enough to get me in trouble. And blending that in ways that kind of make sense, clinically makes sense. So grounding it with some aspects of parts work, right? So even when you're using a theoretical an integrative theoretical model, you're still thinking about what your theory model, or what what the theory says, because polyvagal is not a treatment model, it's a theory. And you're thinking about what does that look like when you're using it with play therapy. How are you making sense of what's going on? How are you figuring out what you're going to say, when you're going to say it, how you're going to say it, and how you're going to make sense of what's going on? And so Santre therapy is one type of expressive arts approach that you can integrate in to the play therapy process. So then that brings us to the next point, which is, well, now how do you use sand tray with adolescents versus children? And when you're thinking about this in your clinical case conceptualization, which is a fancy term for how are you making sense of what's at the root of the problem, and then what are the patterns sustaining it, and how are you going to help your clients heal? When you're integrating in that whole conceptualization of what to do, then you're also taking into consideration development. So there are developmental differences between children and adolescents, and there are developmental differences between adolescents and adults. And as I spoke in a couple of previous episodes, one of the things that I have observed as a play therapist and as somebody who's been in the child and adolescent mental health field for over 30 years is we tend to treat adolescents kind of like little adults and focus mostly on using talk therapy, thinking that that's the most effective way to help them get insight. And if you're working with really kind of high functioning adolescents who are pretty stable and have access to good insight, then that'll work fine. But there's a lot of adolescents coming to therapy that don't have that ability when they're first starting therapy with you, and they need another way to go about healing. And so when we're thinking developmentally about using the sand tray making process with adolescents, then there are a couple of things that I've observed with this. So I'm going to share some of my insights. I don't really have any research or data to back this up other than through all of my consultation over the last, when did I started probably back in 2007 doing consulting and supervising and training. So since that time, plus my own anecdotal experiences, what I've noticed is kids, for the most part, so I'm going to speak in generalities here because we also, there's always outliers. And typically speaking, what we find is children, when you introduce them to the playroom, they are like, Nirvana, I have just landed in the most magical place. Look at all these toys. And they will typically, some may be a little more slow to warm up than others, but they will typically get started in the playing process pretty quickly and don't require a lot of kind of intervention to do that. And so for children, when you introduce them to the playroom, they'll get started right away. Adolescents typically need to get comfortable, maybe talk a little bit. Not always, not all adolescents, especially the really shut down ones. Talking is, let's say, sustained talking, where all you're doing is talking, is doesn't always create that safe space for them. But typically for adolescents, they need to sit in a chair, they need to chat with you a little bit or have you chat with them, even if it's superficial things, asking about things that are of interest to them. They need a little bit more, I'll say, runway to get comfortable in the session, especially if you're going to introduce expressive arts. They need to get comfortable with you first before you move over to introducing the sand tray making process. So once they're comfortable with you, then you can introduce the sand tray or another expressive arts modality, because you want to create that safe space for your adolescent clients. And they also need to feel like they have permission to explore the symbols, to explore the sand or not. It has to be an invitation and they get to say no if they don't want to. So what we're doing is we're inviting them. We've created a little bit of safety in the session, maybe a session or two. We've created a little bit of safety in there. We've let them sit in a chair or do something that feels comfortable for them. And now we're inviting them into the sand tray making process, because that sand tray making process is what opens up all of the possibilities for exploring the unconscious, or what I say, exploring those implicit experiences and perceptions, and allowing them the opportunity to use symbolic avenues to explore what is going on with the problems that are bringing them in, what are at the roots of those problems. And they're not going to be able to do that unless they feel like unless you've created that free and protected space for them. And that's a process over time. It's not going to happen. Well, it typically doesn't happen instantly. It usually kind of unfolds. That's true for everybody, though. Also, when you're using the sand tray making process with adults, it's kind of a very similar process for them. And so if you're using sand tray therapy with your clients, here's a question for you. If you're watching live on the live stream and you are a child and adolescent therapist, and you're interested in using sand tray, or maybe you're already using sand tray or expressive arts, what are your experiences or tips that you've observed that help teens to get comfortable? Because those are the things that we're going to focus on in the beginning to create that free and protected space for teens. They need a little bit more of a runway. So post those in the comments, or if you're listening on the podcast, feel free to send me a message on Instagram or send me an email. This is the invitation. We're inviting them into the process of using symbol for exploration, which means they don't have to talk about it. They don't have to talk about it. Because they might not have access to those areas of their brain yet. They might need to just explore through symbol before they can make those connections with what it is. The other part, and I would caution people here, I would caution therapists, play therapists here, is don't jump to interpretation, because they might not be ready. Just because you're seeing some connections doesn't mean we need to share it. It's the same in talk therapy. In talk therapy, especially early on in that therapeutic process, we're not sharing all of our interpretations, because here's the thing, it doesn't matter as much as if we get it. It really matters more if they get it. And if they can get it without necessarily having a whole conversation with you about it, then that's the important thing. The important thing is, how are they using that process for healing? This is years ago. I once had a colleague that I was consulting with, and the therapist had a client who had been diagnosed with selective mutism. So the client struggled with talking in therapy, or just talking with adults. And so the talking process was hard for her. And what we realized, and this is why I want to make my point about it needs to be what the client needs, and it's not about what we need in the therapy process, in terms of, do we make interpretations to clients or do we not? Do they have to talk to us or not in order for this be healing. And I have seen this so many times. I think the process was, I think the treatment was probably about a year, coming every week. And every week, this client would immediately and this was an adolescent client, young adolescent client, early teen, using the sand tray every week, coming in, creating a sand world. The therapist just kind of held space and just would invite, hey, do you want to make a sand world? And every week the answer was yes. And then the therapist and I would kind of explore the themes and look at what was going on using our theory model, attachment and neuroscience. And we were able to see what she was communicating. We don't require kids to explain their play behaviors with us. And so to me, we want to make sure we're not having that expectation of teenagers. And because this therapist was able to hold that space, create that sense of safety where you don't have to talk. It's your choice. This went on week after week after week throughout the whole treatment process. And what we observed was week after week after week, this client, without saying a word, was working through what was at the roots of her symptoms of selective mutism, not talking, freezing up. I look at selective mutism as freezing. And so, and through consultation with parents and what we knew was that it was working. That client didn't need to talk to the therapist and have a cognitive conversation about the symbolism that was being used in the sand tray, because this particular early teen client was getting it done, was making sense of it, was using that process for healing. And so I say that as a reminder of, we think with adolescents that they need to always talk to us about it and they always need to get insight. And as play therapists, we know that that isn't true. And it also isn't true for teenagers. When we're helping them use the sand tray to access those therapeutic powers of play for healing using the sand tray, that symbolic process, using that expressive arts modality, they can use that for healing. So, and it depends on the teenager, just like it depends on the child. It also depends on your theory model, how much talking and processing you're doing, and at what stage of the treatment process are you in? Are they ready for it? Is it something that's going to be meaningful for them? You're assessing all of those things as you're getting to know your client, and your theory model is going to help you know when to do that, helping them make the connections. If that's, if you're using Adlerian play therapy, at some point, after there's a sense of safety in there and you're doing that insight part of it where you're helping them to connect what's going on with behaviors and seeing how they might be able to get their needs met in other ways more effectively. So in an Adlerian play therapy model, at some point, but you have to wait until that's the point in the treatment phases or the stages of treatment. And trust in the fact that through that, through those therapeutic powers of play and holding that free and protected space, that they can work through those things that are going on. Here's the other thing to think about: if we're using more of an interpersonal neurobiology approach, then we know our attuned presence in the sand tray, their interaction with the sand and the miniatures, all of that on a kind of neural integration process, they're going to be able to use that to facilitate that healing process. So this is again where what's your theoretical model say about how the process works? And we've been reading so in play therapy elevation circle, which is my I call it kind of like my tier 1 play therapy membership. Tier 2 is Play Therapy Academy. That's where we do a deeper dive. Play Therapy Academy, we go deep. We go deep in elevation circle. Just it's not heavily skill based like Play Therapy Academy is. Anyway, Play Therapy Academy and Elevation Circle, we're doing we have a book club. And so we're reading the book, Being a Brainwise Therapist by Bonnie Badenoch. And so it seems weird to me that 2008 is a long time ago. Just seems like it should be like 5 years ago or maybe last decade, but not a couple of decades. So in there, we're reading the book. So this book is heavily is focused on using interpersonal neurobiology. And one of the things she talks about a lot in the book is the neural integration and the role of that therapeutic process. One of the reasons I picked the book for Play Therapy Academy and Play Therapy Elevation Circle Book Club is because she does chapters on using interpersonal neurobiology with teens, with using art, using sand tray, children. So it was really relevant to play therapists. It's such a good book. I've read through it a few times. That's one of my favorites. But anyway, so if again we're grounding in a theoretical model, and if we're thinking about interpersonal neurobiology and we're using the sand tray, then we're thinking about all of those things. How is that attuned therapeutic relationship creating that sense of safety and presence and connecting resonant circuits, facilitating neural integration? And if we're introducing the sand tray making process in there, that sensory interaction with the sand and the symbols and moving things around and symbolically accessing the implicit experiences, self-expression, all of those therapeutic powers of play. We're kind of holding that as we're thinking developmentally and clinically, how does this work with adolescents? If you're interested in learning more about using the sand tray making process with your clients in therapy, I'm going to talk a little bit at the end about a training that I have coming up. It's in person because we are getting hands in the sand. It's a very small group. I keep it really small. I kind of call it like at a retreat like experience where we're small group, we're making sand trays, we're processing sand trays, we're using that whole process for learning and grounding that work that we're doing with our child and adolescent clients. So that's coming up in April. If you're interested, registration is still open. The early bird price is going to be closing soon. So I'll just let you know that. Also, if you're interested in Play Therapy Academy because you really want to develop the core competencies using play therapy with children, adolescents, and families, then I do have some openings in Play Therapy Academy at this point in time. So if you're interested in Play Therapy Academy, or maybe you're not sure if Play Therapy Academy or Elevation Circle work is more, which one fits better, then just schedule a call and we will figure it out together. What I decided in 2026, because Elevation Circle is currently closed, enrollment's not open at this point in time, and I only have openings in Play Therapy Academy as people leave, because we keep that a very small group. If if you attend any of my trainings, like I have this week, if you're interested, I have a training on using play therapy with adolescents using expressive arts. Registration for the training this Saturday, March 7th, closes tomorrow, Thursday, March 5th. I have that one, and then I also have the Santre training next month in April. If you register for the trainings, then you do get access to 2 months of Elevation Circle. The reason I've done that is because I really feel like, especially like with Santre and using expressive arts and feeling more competent using it, what I found is it really does help to have a community of play therapists who are going to kind of walk alongside of you to help you take what you learned in the training to apply it in real time. So I always felt like I've gone to the trainings, which I love, but then like a month later, I'm like, what did we talk about? How did they say to do this? And then I go pull out my slides and I try to remember what they said. So this way, having access to a play therapy community and Elevation Circle is going to provide support even after the training. So I will talk some more about those at the end if you're interested in any of those. So I want to round up today's episode by talking about just giving you some ideas for using prompts. So typically when you're working with adolescents using the Santre, then you are typically being more directive, giving them some prompts about getting started in the Santre. This is true for adults as well. I have found the Santre making process to be so effective, excuse me, when I'm working with adolescents and also adults, especially when they've experienced a lot of trauma or, attachment trauma. And we're working through some of those attachment wounds using the symbolic avenues available through expressive arts. In this case, Santre, the Santre making process can be so valuable. And to do that, I'll usually use prompts. So some prompts to think about. Here's one. So typically the way that I use prompts with the Santre making process with adolescents and adults, I'll put that in there. A lot of times that I might be exploring some things. We might be talking through a few things. And then I'll introduce the Santre and I'll say, in here it could be however we want. So if you were, let's say we were talking about depression, right? And how they're feeling depressed and what it's like experiencing those symptoms of depression where you feel like you're walking through a mud pit and you just are moving so slowly and you're feeling sluggish and you're just feeling down about everything and feeling a little hopeless. Maybe you have one of those adolescent clients who are going way existential in their head and they can get way too stuck in their head. Introducing the Santre can be a way to get them unstuck. So the way that I might do that, if we're exploring depression and what that's like, I might say to my adolescent client or adult client, so in here, things can be however we want. So if you were to choose one of these miniatures or several miniatures to represent what it feels like, what is the experience of depression? And you take those symbols and you put them in the sand, which ones would you choose? And if it's the first couple of times, especially the first time, a lot of times what I'll also say is, it doesn't always make sense why you're choosing or why you feel drawn to a particular miniature. Just go with it. I promise you there's no wrong way to do this. However you do it, it'll be just the way it needs to be. There's no wrong way. I promise you it'll all work out and it'll be just exactly how it needs to be. And then I'll just kind of confidently hold that space quietly until they find a symbol or symbols that best represent that. And then the key word I'm about to say is invitation. That is a key word. So what I do next is I invite them to say as much or as little as they want to about that. We want to make sure it's an invitation so that it doesn't put too much pressure on them. And if they don't want to say anything, they don't have to say anything. So that's one way I use the prompt. If you know there are some family issues, you might use the prompt of pick the miniatures that best represent how you see yourself in your family, and then invite them to put that in the sand tray. If they're exploring peer relationships and maybe they're struggling with that, you can invite them to pick the miniatures that best represent how they think their peers see them, their friends, what miniatures would represent that, put those in the sand tray. Or maybe you are doing some parts work. Maybe you are a big fan of internal family systems and you're wanting to do some parts work. You can explore them. Maybe they're looking at an angry part, and you can invite them to pick the miniature or miniatures that best represent that angry part, and then put that in there. Or maybe they have another part, or maybe there's one of the protectors that are kind of getting in the way. Then you can have them choose miniatures that best represent that protector, and maybe have a conversation with that protector about, hey, can you let this part over here talk with us, or that whole process. Another prompt you can use is, I use this one especially early on in the treatment process, and that is using a safe world, or using the miniatures to create a safe world. So if you were to create a safe world, what would that world look like? And you can use as many or as few of the miniatures as you would like to create a safe world or your ideal world. So those, again, are prompts. I find prompts work effectively in the beginning when I'm working with adolescent clients in the play therapy process. Also works well with adults as well. And again, you're going to want to create that safe space in order for them to feel comfortable engaging that with you. So that is it for today. Let me do a quick recap for today's episode of using the sand tray making process in play therapy with adolescents. So the sand tray making process is an expressive arts modality, and you can integrate that in the play therapy process because you are helping your adolescent clients access those therapeutic powers of play based on a theoretical model, and they could use that process for healing within that safe therapeutic relationship. And there are some developmental differences when you're working with children and adolescents in the play therapy process, including when you're integrating expressive arts like the sand tray making process. So you want to make sure to create that sense of safety in that therapeutic relationship, because they need to get to know you a little bit better. They probably need to sit in a chair before you invite them into the sand tray. Some, and that's going to look different, especially if you have an adolescent who's pretty emotionally shut down. The conversations are not going to be maybe as long as maybe a less shut down adolescent client. But there's usually some bit of helping that teenager feel comfortable in the session with you before you invite them into the sand tray making process. And then I shared some tips with you using prompts, because using prompts is a pretty effective way to help them get started, especially in the beginning, and understanding how this process works and how they can use that Santre making process. Once they feel more comfortable in there, you probably don't have to give as many prompts. You probably just invite them into the Santre and they all know exactly what to do. And you can use the Santre making process in your sessions as you're exploring different things, and then invite them to show you what that would look like using the miniatures. What would that experience look like as you go through the treatment process? So that is it for today. If you're interested in more training, so you probably want to hop over to my website. I have a training coming up on Saturday, this Saturday, March 7th. It's called Play Therapy with Adolescents Using Expressive Arts. So the registration for that one closes tomorrow, March 5th. If you are interested in learning more about the Santre and using the Santre, then I have a training coming up next week. So the training on Saturday, Play Therapy with Adolescents Using Expressive Arts, there's a virtual option, there's an in-person option. And if the time zone doesn't work for you, or maybe you're not available, and there is a recorded version that you can purchase. The Santre training, because I think it's really important to get your hands in the sand, creating and processing Santres, and we use that Santre making process to learn. It's a very small group experience. I have a few spots left for the April training. It's 2 days where we immerse ourselves in the Santre making process, learning and exploring together. That training is coming up next month in April. If you're interested in either one of those trainings, you're going to want to pop over to my website at rhplaytherapytraining.com. That's Renewing Hearts Playtherapytraining.com. And these two trainings come with 60 days of access to Play Therapy Elevation Circle at no cost for new members. So if you're not already a member of Elevation Circle, then you have 60 days of access to Elevation Circle to continue that learning and getting support with what you've learned in the training. I just really feel like having a place for support after the training is important to continue that learning process. So if you're interested in those, then pop over to my website at rhplaytherapytraining.com. That's Renewing Hearts Play Therapy Training. Also, if you're interested, I do have some openings in Play Therapy Academy. Play Therapy Academy is my online, I call it like my tier 2 membership. We go much deeper into skill building and core competencies in Play Therapy Academy than we do in Elevation Circle. Play Therapy Academy is a much smaller online program. We meet twice a month. There are courses in the program, play therapy courses in there. There's lots of support between our meetings. We do case presentations, learning core competencies for play therapy so that you don't feel like an imposter when you're using play therapy, and you have a much more grounded sense of how to take the play therapy model that you're using, how do you apply that through each stage of the play therapy process. And so I only have openings in Play Therapy Academy when others kind of graduate or move on. I've had people in Play Therapy Academy for sometimes they stay for a few months, and then life happens and they need to kind of shift gears. people will stay for like a year, 2 years, 3 years, a little longer. We're a really tight, supportive little group, and it's amazing to see what that experience of community and learning and growing together. So if you're interested in Play Therapy Academy, then pop over to my website at rhplaytherapytraining.com, go onto the supervision page and schedule a 30-minute video call with me. We will figure out if Play Therapy Academy is a good fit for you or not, or maybe Elevation Circle might be a good fit for you, and you can go on the wait list when we open up enrollment again for that. So that is it for today, and I will see you next time. Bye for now. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Next Level Play Therapy. I hope you found the discussion valuable and gained new insights and ideas to support your work helping children, adolescents, and families heal. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. Your feedback helps to improve and reach more people who can benefit from this information. Remember, play therapy is a powerful tool for healing and growth. Whether you're a new play therapist or experienced, I encourage you to continue your learning journey to unlock the potential of play in your own work and relationships. If you have any questions or topic suggestions for future episodes, I'd love to hear from you. Connect with me on social media and visit my website at Renewing Hearts Play Therapy Training to stay updated on upcoming episodes, trainings, and resources. Thank you once again for listening to Next Level Play Therapy. Until next time, keep playing, learning, and growing.